Hello and welcome to our historical deep dive channel. Today we're exploring the life and legacy of one of Britain's most iconic monarchs, Queen Victoria. Reigning for an impressive 63 years, her era transformed not only the United Kingdom but the entire world, marking the height of the British Empire and the Industrial Revolution. From her early days as a sheltered princess to becoming the grandmother of Europe, Queen Victoria's story is one of personal tragedy, immense power, and an indelible impact on society and culture. So, sit back, relax, and join us as we journey back to the 19th century to uncover the fascinating life of Queen Victoria. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications on our latest historical explorations. Let's get started. Queen Victoria, born Alexandrina Victoria, entered the world on the 24th of May, 1819, at Kensington Palace in London. Her birth was significant not just to her immediate family but to the whole of Britain, as she was fifth in line to the throne at the time of her birth. Her father, Edward, Duke of Kent and Strathearn, was the fourth son of King George III, and her mother was Princess Victoria of Saxe-Coburg-Saalfeld, a German princess. Victoria's birth was met with great public interest, but also with the weighty expectation that she might one day become queen, as her father and his three elder brothers had no surviving legitimate children. Tragically, Victoria's father died of pneumonia just 8 months after her birth, leaving her mother a widow and Victoria an only child. Her upbringing was consequently dominated by her mother and the comptroller to her mother's household, Sir John Conroy, who implemented the so-called Kensington system. This was a strict and isolating regime designed to make Victoria dependent on her mother and Conroy, keeping her insulated from the court's influence and the public eye. Despite these constraints, Victoria was a naturally intelligent and spirited child, educated at home by a series of tutors. She learned to speak and write in both English and German and received lessons in French, Italian and Latin. She was also educated in history, geography, and the arts. However, her education was skewed towards making her reliant and submissive, rather than preparing her for future regal duties. Yet, the young princess was anything but submissive. Behind her demure and petite appearance, she possessed a strong will and a keen sense of her own destiny. She resented the Kensington system and the attempts to manipulate her, a sentiment that became more pronounced as she grew older and became more aware of her potential future as Britain's monarch. Despite her isolated childhood, or perhaps because of it, Victoria developed a keen sense of independence and a strong personal character. She grew increasingly eager to assert her will and make her own decisions, particularly regarding her future role as queen. This inner strength and determination would serve her well, as she ascended to the throne just a month after turning 18, marking the beginning of what would be a long, influential, and historic reign. Thus, while Victoria's early years were marked by isolation and control under the Kensington system, they also shaped the resilient and strong-willed character that she would become known for as queen. Her upbringing, fraught with loneliness and manipulation, ultimately contributed to her becoming a determined, independent, and iconic monarch. Queen Victoria's education and preparation for the throne were both unconventional and rigorous, shaped by the unique circumstances of her upbringing and the expectations placed upon her from a young age. From the outset, Victoria's education was heavily influenced by the so-called Kensington system orchestrated by her mother, the Duchess of Kent, and Sir John Conroy, the comptroller of the Duchess's household. This system aimed to keep Victoria isolated from external influences and tightly control her education and social interactions. Despite its intention to prepare her for future duties, the system also sought to make her dependent on her mother and Conroy, limiting her independent thought and decision-making. Nevertheless, Victoria's curriculum was comprehensive. She was educated at home by a series of private tutors, a common practice among royalty and the aristocracy at the time. Her lessons included the English and German languages, reflecting her British and German heritage. She became proficient in both, which was essential for her future role in a Europe where German was widely spoken among royalty. Additionally, Victoria received instruction in French, Italian and Latin, which not only equipped her with the linguistic skills necessary for diplomacy, but also exposed her to a broad range of European literature and culture. Her tutors were selected for their knowledge and moral standing, ensuring that she received a well-rounded education. Beyond languages, Victoria's studies encompassed history, particularly British history, which was vital for understanding the context and responsibilities of her future role. She also studied geography, giving her knowledge of the vast British Empire she would one day govern. Her education in the arts included music, drawing and painting, which were considered essential. However, her education was not without its deficiencies. The Kensington system's restrictive nature meant that, while she was well educated in academic subjects, Victoria was sheltered from the practicalities of governance and statecraft. Her preparation for the responsibilities of monarchy was limited, with little direct experience or understanding of political affairs. This lack of practical knowledge was a significant hurdle she had to overcome upon ascending the throne. Despite these shortcomings, Victoria's education instilled in her a love of learning and a sense of duty. Her tutors, especially her last governess, Baroness Lehzen, became lifelong friends and advisors. They encouraged her independent thought, which helped foster the strong will and determination she would later exhibit as queen. As Victoria grew older, the possibility of her ascension to the throne became more apparent. Her uncle, King William IV, had no legitimate heirs, making her the heir presumptive. This realization spurred a more focused preparation for her future role. Although still under the thumb of the Kensington system, Victoria began to assert herself more, seeking to learn about the British Constitution and government affairs, albeit within the constraints imposed upon her. In summary, Queen Victoria's education and preparation for the throne were marked by contrasts. While she received a broad and thorough education in the arts and academics, her preparation for the practicalities of ruling was significantly lacking. However, the challenges of her upbringing and the limitations of her education did not deter her. Instead, they contributed to the development of her resilience, independence, and determination to succeed as a monarch. Queen Victoria's ascension to the British throne was a pivotal event, marking the dawn of a new era in British history. Born fifth in line to the throne, Victoria's path to sovereignty was not initially clear. However, a series of familial deaths brought her closer to the crown, setting the stage for her historic reign. Victoria's journey toward monarchy began under the shadow of her royal uncles. In 1830, her grandfather, King George III, passed away, leaving the crown to his son, King George IV. His reign was short-lived, and he was succeeded by his brother, King William IV. Victoria, being the daughter of the late Edward, Duke of Kent, who was the fourth son of George III, found herself third in line to the throne following the deaths of her father and grandfather. King William IV ascended the throne when Victoria was just a child. As he had no legitimate offspring, Victoria became his heir presumptive. The king himself was well aware of the young princess's destiny, and during his reign there was a growing public interest in Victoria, who was seen as a symbol of youth and hope for the future. Despite her proximity to the throne, Victoria's upbringing under the Kensington system meant that she was largely kept isolated from the royal court and political affairs. This isolation, however, did not dampen her sense of responsibility or diminish her awareness of her potential future as queen. As she grew older, Victoria became more involved in state matters, albeit in a limited capacity, preparing herself for the inevitable. The turning point came on June 20th, 1837. Victoria was just 18 years old when she was awakened early in the morning by her mother, who informed her that the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Lord Chamberlain had arrived at Kensington Palace. They were there to deliver the sombre news King William IV had died, and Victoria was now Queen. Despite the early hour and the suddenness of the news, Victoria handled the situation with a composure that belied her years. She met the officials dressed simply, without any of the regalia typically associated with royalty. Her first actions as Queen were marked by a sense of duty and a desire to assert her independence. She requested to be alone while receiving the official news of her accession, signalling a break from the controlling influences of her upbringing. Victoria's coronation took place a year later, on June 28, 1838, in Westminster Abbey. The ceremony was a grand and festive event, celebrating not just the ascension of a new monarch but the hopeful beginning of a new chapter in British history. The young Queen, adorned in the traditional robes and regalia, took the oath and was crowned amid the cheers of the public and the nobility. The early days of Victoria's reign were marked by her determination to be a hands-on monarch and to learn the workings of government. She faced challenges, notably the bedchamber crisis, which tested her will against that of her Prime Minister, but she navigated these with a growing sense of authority and confidence. Queen Victoria's ascension to the throne was a transformative moment both for her and for Britain. From a sheltered princess living under the stringent Kensington system, she emerged as a queen ready to take on the responsibilities and challenges of the monarchy. Her rise to the throne marked the beginning of what would be one of the longest and most iconic reigns in British history. Queen Victoria's marriage and family life were central aspects of her reign and personal identity, profoundly impacting her public image, personal happiness, and the political landscape of the era. In February 1840, Victoria married her first cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, a union that was both a love match and a political alliance. Despite initial reservations about the marriage from various members of the British court and the public, Victoria was enamoured with Albert from the beginning. She proposed to him, as was customary for a queen, breaking from traditional gender roles of the time. The marriage between Victoria and Albert was, by many accounts, a passionate and committed partnership, unusual among royal unions, which were often arranged solely for political or economic gain. Victoria found in Albert not just a husband but a true companion and advisor. This closeness was reflected in their prolific family life over the next 17 years. Victoria and Albert had 9 children. Victoria, Albert Edward Hedward, who would later become King Edward VII, Alice, Alfred, Helena, Louise, Arthur, Leopold, and Beatrice. These children formed the basis of what Victoria hoped would be a royal house of Europe. She married her offspring into various European royal families, creating a network of alliances that earned her the nickname the Grandmother of Europe. However, this strategic matchmaking also had complex and sometimes tragic consequences, as the intermarriage among European royals contributed to the spread of genetic disorders and political tensions. Despite the demands of her extensive family, Victoria was not considered a warm or nurturing mother by modern standards. The Queen's journals reveal that she was often overwhelmed and frustrated by pregnancy and childbirth, viewing them as interruptions to her duties as monarch. Moreover, she placed the responsibility for the children's daily care and education largely in the hands of nannies and tutors, as was customary among the nobility of the time. However, Victoria's relationship with her children evolved as they grew older. She relied heavily on her eldest daughter, also named Victoria, during her widowhood, and she had complicated relationships with her other children, marked by conflict and reconciliation. Her letters and diaries reveal a woman who was deeply invested in the lives of her offspring, even as she struggled with the balance between her roles as a mother and a sovereign. The death of Prince Albert in 1861 was a crushing blow to Victoria, plunging her into a deep mourning that lasted for the remainder of her life. Albert's death marked a significant shift in Victoria's reign and personal life. She withdrew from public view, wearing black for the rest of her life and neglecting many of her public duties, which led to a period of significant unpopularity. Her retreat from public life after Albert's death also strained her relationships with her children, as she often imposed her mourning on them and relied increasingly on her youngest son, Leopold, and her Scottish servant, John Brown, for companionship. Despite these challenges, Victoria's later years saw a reconciliation with the public and a softening of her personal hardships. She developed a close relationship with her Indian servant Abdul Karim, which, like her relationship with John Brown, caused controversy within her family and court. Her family, particularly her children and numerous grandchildren, remained a source of both joy and stress throughout her life. Queen Victoria's marriage and family life were marked by profound love, strategic ambition, and personal tragedy. Her partnership with Prince Albert significantly influenced British society and the monarchy, while her extensive progeny shaped the future of European royal dynamics. Despite facing criticism for her role as a mother and her extended period of mourning, Victoria's familial relationships profoundly shaped her reign and her legacy. Queen Victoria's reign, spanning from 1837 to 1901, was a period of significant transformation and innovation, marking the height of the British Empire and the zenith of the Industrial Revolution. Known as the Victorian era, her reign was the longest in British history until surpassed by Queen Elizabeth II. Victoria ascended the throne at the tender age of 18, inheriting a Britain that was expanding industrially and globally. Her early reign was marked by a series of political challenges and learning curves as she navigated her role with the guidance of her first Prime Minister, Lord Melbourne. Victoria's influence in governmental affairs was initially limited, however. She gradually asserted her presence, embodying the constitutional monarchy's ideals. The Queen's marriage to Prince Albert in 1840 was a turning point. Albert became her trusted advisor and helped modernize the British monarchy's public image. Together, they endorsed social reforms and public welfare, influencing legislation on issues such as child labor, education, and public health, which were critical during the Industrial Revolution. Under Victoria, the British Empire expanded exponentially, becoming the world's largest empire, controlling over a quarter of the world's population and landmass. The era was marked by significant colonial expansion in Africa, Asia, and the Pacific. Notable events include the Opium Wars in China, the colonization of Australia and New Zealand, and the scramble for Africa. Despite the imperial expansion, Victoria's reign also saw tensions and conflicts, such as the Indian Rebellion of 1857, which led to the dissolution of the British East India Company and the establishment of British imperial rule in India. Victoria was proclaimed Empress of India in 1876, emphasizing the empire's global dominance. The Victorian era was notable for its cultural and technological advancements. The period saw significant developments in science, literature, and the arts, contributing to the rich cultural tapestry of Britain. The Great Exhibition of 1851, organized by Prince Albert, showcased the era's technological innovations and cultural achievements, promoting industry and art. The latter part of Victoria's reign was marked by personal loss and public resurgence. The death of Prince Albert in 1861 left Victoria in profound mourning. She withdrew from public life, leading to a period of unpopularity. However, by the latter part of the 19th century, Victoria had adapted to her role as the matriarch of Europe, overseeing a period of industrial, cultural, and imperial expansion. Victoria's Golden and Diamond Jubilees, celebrated with great fanfare, marked her long service and reign's achievements. When she passed away in 1901, she left behind a legacy that deeply influenced British society, culture, and politics. Her reign, characterized by vast change and progress, symbolized the transition from agrarian societies to industrial superpowers, shaping modern Britain. The Victorian era set the stage for the modern age, reflecting the complexities and contradictions of progress, empire, and identity. Victoria's reign began amidst a wave of political reform. The Reform Acts of 1832, 1867, and 1884 extended voting rights significantly, shifting the political landscape of Britain. These acts gradually expanded the franchise from a small, elite group to a broader section of the male population, setting the stage for modern democratic processes. One of the crowning achievements of Victoria's reign, orchestrated by her husband Prince Albert, was the Great Exhibition of 1851. Held in the Crystal Palace in Hyde Park, London, this event showcased the wonders of industry and technology from around the world, symbolizing the industrial supremacy and innovative spirit of the Victorian age. The Crimean War was a significant military conflict during Victoria's reign, involving Britain, France, the Ottoman Empire, and Sardinia against Russia. The war highlighted the need for military and medical reforms, notably leading to Florence Nightingale's pioneering work in nursing, which transformed medical practices. The Indian Rebellion, also known as the Sepoy Mutiny, was a major, but ultimately unsuccessful, uprising against the British East India Company's rule. Its suppression led to the end of the company's reign and the transfer of India's control to the British Crown, with Victoria being proclaimed Empress of India in 1876. One of the darkest periods in Irish history, the Great Famine had profound social and political impacts. The British government's inadequate response to the crisis, which resulted in the death of approximately 1 million people and the emigration of many more, left a legacy of bitterness and mistrust towards British rule. While the Slavery Abolition Act was passed just before Victoria's reign in 1833, its implementation and the fight against the global slave trade were significant aspects of her era, reflecting the changing attitudes towards human rights and freedom. Victoria's reign saw the British Empire reach its zenith, becoming the largest empire in history. This expansion was driven by exploration, military conquests, and colonization, particularly in Africa and Asia, leading to the era being dubbed the Imperial Century. The Victorian era was a time of significant scientific discovery and technological innovation, including the development of the steam engine, telegraph, and railway networks. These advances changed the face of Britain, revolutionizing transportation, communication, and industry. The era saw significant social and cultural shifts, including the rise of the middle class, changes in attitudes towards gender and morality, and the beginnings of the women's suffrage movement. The period was also notable for its literary and artistic contributions, with figures like Charles Dickens, the Bronte sisters, and Thomas Hardy. Queen Victoria, the longest reigning monarch in British history at the time, passed away on January 22, 1901, at the age of 81. Her death marked the end of an era that had seen tremendous change and development in Britain and around the world. Her passing was not only a moment of mourning but also a reflection on the legacy she left behind. Victoria spent her final years at Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, a place she loved and considered her private retreat. Her health had been in decline, exacerbated by the loss of her beloved husband, Prince Albert, which had cast a long shadow over the latter half of her life. Despite her deteriorating condition, she continued to fulfill her duties as Queen with the help of her secretaries and family. In early January 1901, Victoria's health took a turn for the worse, and her family was summoned to her bedside. She was surrounded by her children and grandchildren, including the future King Edward VII and German Emperor Wilhelm II, in her final days. Her death brought an end to the Victorian era and heralded the beginning of the Edwardian era, named after her son and successor, Edward VII. Victoria had left detailed instructions for her funeral, a reflection of her personality and her desire to maintain control even in death. She wished for a military funeral and was interred in the Royal Mausoleum at Frogmore Estate, beside her husband, Prince Albert. The nation and the empire mourned her passing, with thousands lining the streets to pay their respects as her cortege passed. Her death was felt not just in Britain but across the globe, where the news was met with expressions of condolence and mourning. Queen Victoria's legacy is multifaceted and enduring. She had witnessed and presided over the transformation of Britain into the world's foremost industrial and imperial power. The Victorian era, named after her, was noted for its significant cultural, social, and technological advancements, as well as for its imperial expansion. Her personal life, particularly her marriage to Prince Albert, influenced her reign and the perception of the monarchy. Her deep mourning and withdrawal from public life following Albert's death brought criticism and led to a period of unpopularity for the monarchy, but her later years saw a resurgence in public support. Victoria was also the matriarch of a vast royal dynasty. Her children and grandchildren married into the royal and noble families of Europe, earning her the nickname the Grandmother of Europe. This network of relationships across the continent had far-reaching, if complex, implications for European diplomacy and were a factor in the lead-up to World War I. Culturally, Victoria became an icon of an era characterized by strict morals, a sense of duty, and a touch of prudishness often associated with Victorian values. Yet her reign also saw the seeds of modernity, with significant social reforms, the expansion of the franchise, and advancements in science and industry. In conclusion, Queen Victoria's death marked the end of a significant chapter in British and world history. Her legacy, complex and extensive, continues to be analysed and debated. She left behind a Britain fundamentally changed from the one she had inherited, shaped by the forces of industrialisation, empire, and the social and cultural shifts of the 19th century. Her influence, and that of the era she symbolises, remains evident in the continued global fascination with her life and reign. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life and legacy of Queen Victoria, a monarch whose reign transformed not only the United Kingdom, but also the wider world. From the grandeur of the Victorian era to the personal trials she faced, her story is a fascinating reflection of a pivotal time in history. If you enjoyed this exploration, please like, share, and subscribe for more insightful content. Your support helps us continue to uncover and share the stories that shape our world. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.